Okay, tonight we're going to start. We're going to talk about personal ethics and revelational ethics. And what we're going to do tonight is basically outline what I mean by that topic and what it is we're going to study. Okay. So, what really is this issue? So, the first question, or the real essence of the question, is what is the source for ethics? Does ethics come from something inside you, or does ethics come from something outside the person? So, if ethics comes from something inside you, this was the world of the rationalists. The rationalists held that we have a rational understanding of what is ethical. Okay, in the secular world, not that he's the only one who finds it, but the definition has sort of gone through this major point through the thought of Immanuel Kant to find the categorical imperative that all human beings have a sense of the ethical. It's rational and it's inside the person. Okay, and that's called the categorical imperative. Okay, and that's to be contrasted to the perception of revelational ethics or revelation, which is that ethics is defined outside of the person, right? Which basically is the perception of revelational religion, that God reveals what is ethical, the definition of ethical. So the point is that, so the question is, when it says don't kill, if you say you buy an ethic of do not kill, is that sense that it's ethical come from within the person, the categorical imperative of Kant, okay, that I feel it's wrong to kill, or does it come from outside the person? I.e., Kodesh Baruch Hu in Har Sinai says, don't kill. And therefore, you have a statement outside of you, outside of your own perception, a world that comes out and says, this is ethical, do not kill. Okay? God tells me what is ethical or it's not ethical versus the sense of something inside you that tells you that something is ethical. Now, on the surface, let's say, okay, so that's two issues. And basically, you can divide the world of secular world and the religious world by saying the religious world believes in revelational ethics, and the secular world believes in rational or inherent ethics. So if you hear of, let's say, a secular humanist or an atheist that says we can be ethical, he says we all know what's ethical from inside ourselves, and therefore the argument is you don't really need God, right? Because we all know what's ethical. Okay, that argument has a lot of challenges to it. But many people in the religious world will say, well, we have to show you that if you don't have God, you don't have any ethics. Okay, and how would that develop? Because especially what Kant said was something where he had a categorical imperative that all human beings have the sense of what is ethical. But once you start having subjectivity or relativism, which is what we have today, which has moved beyond Kant to the fact that everyone comes up with their own feeling, I feel this is ethical and you feel that's ethical, then the point is that there's no clear-cut definition of ethics. So religions like to point to the fact that, hey, if you rely only upon your own categorical perception of ethics, then basically, what do you do if there's disagreements on that? Basically, it comes down to whatever you're feeling. Okay, so let's say you have positions pro-life versus pro-choice. They both feel they're ethically correct. So, how can you make any decision on your own? Or not only that, ethics can go through transformation. 75 years ago, it was pretty well accepted that that homosexuality was immoral, unethical. Now, each their own. It's now unethical to attack them for being homosexuals. So the point is that that's a classic religious argument against ethics, against the personal feeling of ethics. That You can't rely upon your feelings whatsoever. They change. It means nothing. You need to have a standardized, clear statement of ethics, and therefore God gives you that statement. Now, it sounds like a great reason to believe in God. Actually, it just means that, what the person can do is invent a God. I believe God told me this, right? Which is like, you find that, is it really that God tells you to do this, or is it really the fact you come up with an ethical perception and you project it onto God to tell you to do this? That's an attack upon religion. Okay, but there's a greater issue. See, if you buy revelational ethics, which is obviously at the essence of Torah, then the question emerges, so what is your personal feelings? What is your personal feelings? Like, don't commit murder. Okay, so you know it's ethical to not commit murder. You know it's wrong to commit murder because God told you not to commit murder. Fine. What about this feeling you have inside you that it's wrong to commit murder? Does that feeling mean anything? Does it have any perception? Any value? Now, we know the Rambam held the distinction between what he called the chukim, or the chukot, and the mitzvahs sichlios, between the mitzvahs that are rational. He said the mitzvahs sichlios, it's important for you to have a personal morality for it. In other words, do not murder are mitzvahs that you can have from your own personal perception as well. Okay? So he says certain mitzvahs are like that. There's other mitzvahs they're not ethical whatsoever. Don't eat pork. What kind of emotion you're supposed to have, but don't eat pork? So the Rambam says you're not supposed to have any emotion. You're supposed to say the pork looks good. I really like to have the pork. There's no reason I can't have pork. But except for the fact that Kosh Baruch Hu told me not to eat it. So I have no inherent feeling about that perception. Now, the question arises, two issues with the Rambam. That distinction in the Rambam, okay, there is some source of the more that seem to apply to it. But the fact is that it's a real problem to define how you draw that distinction. Where do you make that distinction? Okay? For example, don't eat pork is clearly an example of a chok. What about the sexual prohibitions? Okay, the arayos. Is that a mitzvah sichlius or is that a chok? The application is: are you supposed to look at them and say, according to Rambam, in his perception, that it's not so clear cut that everyone agrees with the Rambam's perception of that distinction? But are you supposed to say, well, I feel like adultery, terrible. It's a terrible thing, adultery. I think I'm disgusted by adultery. Or are you supposed to say, really, I don't see anything wrong with it. Kosh Baruch Hu says it's awesome. And you go to the rest of the arayos. Right? Are you supposed to have that certain sense of a feeling that you're supposed to have this idea that it's wrong? Or are you supposed to sense that it's awesome? Doesn't mean that I have to have that feeling that it's wrong. And are all the arayos the same? Maybe for adultery you say that you're supposed to have that ethical perception. But for something else, no, it's not supposed to have ethical perception. So it's a little bit of an issue, which is which. Okay, the Maral, for example, he makes an interesting statement in his commentary on Pirkei Avos. He says that there's a whole concept in arayos called shniyos arayos, which are extended arayos to Rabbanim, like not to have relations with your grandparents. Extended arayos for them. So he makes a remarkable statement. He says mitzvah slichlius, Chazal did not have to go through, did not have to extend any xeras, not have to create any new drabanans and mitzvah slichlius. Why? Because it's understandable. It's only in the chukim, because we don't have that perception of being something inherently wrong, that we have to have this perception of the drabanans to extend it. Okay? In other words, you don't really feel it's so bad to eat milchus and fleishiks together. So therefore, Chazal had to say chicken is also a fleishik. But something you really feel bad about, he says basically the runner would not geyser to extend the mitzvah sichlius because they weren't necessary. But any specifically sichlius, mitzvah sichlius. That's mitzvot that are reasonable. So the fact is according to that perception, you now end with this concept where he's basically saying all the arayas are hukim, which seems to imply, and he actually says this in the Shmona Prakim, it seems to imply they're all hukim, that or at least some of them are chukim, which seems to imply that you're supposed to have the same attitude towards them as don't eat pork.
Oh, because he extended it. Because the Rambam extended it.
And that's a Morel's argument. But the Rambam says it also in the Shmona Prakim. Now, the point is, though, is the Rambam makes this distinction between mitzvah sichlis and chukim, but how do you make that distinction? Where do you draw the line? Do you rely upon your own perception, your own feeling? So then it raises the question of, so what is the role of revelation on the mitzvah sichlius? Okay, the mitzvah sichlius you know already. What is the point of revelation to the mitzvah sichlius? What really comes down to is this, and now though, the mitzvah sichlius now become interesting because it seems to be that the Rambam is saying there's some value called mitzvah sichlius. There's some value to personal ethics. It causes a distinction in how we relate to Torah law between whether we would have figured out from our own ethical perceptions or whether we only upon revelation to know it's wrong. But our own ethical perceptions go through changes in our world today. Seems to go through a whole, that our personal morality doesn't seem to have any real solid basis. This is where it starts becoming interesting, because at that point in time, with that perception, you have a little bit of an idea where your own personal feeling does it play a role in Torah or not? Okay, and how does it connect to revelational ethics? So here's one aspect that the Rambam makes a distinction between something based upon your personal feeling to know whether you're supposed to read into it and develop an ethical feeling to it, or you don't develop an ethical feeling to it. Then comes the interesting question: what does it mean to develop an ethical feeling? Okay, in the sense that is the Torah really directing you to have certain emotions? I'll give you an example in terms of the mitzvah tzedakah. When you give tzedakah, are you supposed to feel compassion for the ani? Or are you supposed to just say, I have to give this person X amount of dollars? What I'm feeling inside is not really important. Okay? Or what about a person who gives tzedakah because the Gemara says a person who gives tzedakah is going to get more back. Right? Please, clearly, I give tzedakah, I'm going to get more back. Right? So when he's giving tzedakah, the ani, this is defined as tzedakah. I personally don't have any feelings for you. I don't really care. But I'm going to give the money, and I have my own cheshbon of why I give the money. Is a focus only on the action, okay? Or is there a concept that you're supposed to have compassion? Now, this is actually it becomes a whole issue, because one of the arguments, by the way, against Judaism by Christianity was that Judaism was a legal system. Kant, rejected Judaism as a religion because it was all law. And the focus of law is just action. Right? That's all you're interested in. Just abide by the law. I don't care the reason for it. So the point is that if the focus is only on action, and revelational ethics can develop into that, it's just basically saying, here's the right thing to do, and then I just do it. See, that's the other aspect of revelational ethics, is that can it actually be a revealed ethic? Is an ethic a feeling? Is an ethic a perception? Okay? It can be the revelation of a law, a revelation of an action directive. But can I teach someone to actually, or tell someone, you must feel compassion? Okay? And if I tell a person to feel compassion, is that true compassion? Am I really feeling compassion, or I'm developing this emotion because I feel it, which can get into the whole world of acting or whatever it is. mean, what is really compassion? Doesn't it have to come from your gut to really be compassion?
I thought the whole thing is Torah is not legislated from emotions. That's why it doesn't say.
Right.
Hafta es en mecha vesavecha. It's just kibei, not to love
Right,
them.
right. So the point is that that's one of the arguments, but there's other places where it says v'hafta es a ger, v'hafta v'echagocha. The point is a lot of people focus on that the fact is you can't legislate emotions. The whole big issue is can you legislate emotion? V'samachta b'chagecha. What means you're not happy? I'm not happy. Okay, samachta b'chagecha means you have to do an action of simcha, right? You have to buy your wife some nice clothing and jewelry, and buy your kids some toys, and you're not happy because you're running out spending all this money. But the fact is, you're supposed to feel, and that's happy because happiness should be giving to other people.
Isn't simcha supposed to be basar v'yayin?
Yeah, simcha is also supposed to be yayin. The fact is that I didn't go to basar v'yayin because there's a question that, but for sure. But you can also say basar v'yayin. Basar, it might be the basar of shlomim, only the basar of the korban. But the fact is that in yayin. But the fact is because yayin mostly make you happy. But the point is that is it just the action or is it the legislation of the emotions? So some people say, how can you legislate emotions? But then, what about compassion for the ger, or for an ani? Is tzedakah only through the action? I can understand revelational ethics because I can understand revelational law. It tells me to do this. But then, what really are ethics? It really comes to a further question. What's ethics? Is ethics what you're feeling, or is ethics the action? Okay, a person gives, two people in socioeconomics, the same socioeconomic state or position. One gives $1 and goes overseas the army and cries, I feel terrible for you, I feel terrible. Here's $1. Another guy walks by, looks, says, listen, man, I'm in a hurry, I'll get out of here. Here's $25, leave me alone. Right? So, who's better? So
the second guy.
The ani must have said, I don't care how much he cries, I got $25 out of the deal. It's not so simple. A lot of people say that the first person, it's in him, he's the more ethical person, he's the more compassionate person. It permeates his feelings. So there might be a question that he's not so compassionate because he only gave $1. But is it only focus on, is it a focus on what you're thinking, on what you're feeling, or is it just focus on action? See, the thing is that if you say that ethics only come from outside, if there's only the statement from Har Sinai, then you can understand that in terms of behavior and action. But as it gets into how it directs the person, then the question is how much can it teach a person ethics, and how much do we read into it in terms of ethics? Let me give you an example. There's a mitzvah of yibum. Okay? I'll give you an example. Mitzvah of yibum. Right? Okay. So Ashkenazim don't do the mitzvah of yibum, Sephardim still do the mitzvah of yibum. Okay. At least they don't have the issue of not doing yibum. Okay. So, and I think there are still some people who may do yibum. That's Sephardim wrong. Okay. Look at that mitzvah. Okay. Let's assume husband and wife are in love, right? They're in love, they're very happy living. The husband dies. The wife is facing the mitzvah of yibum. So she's told, you now have to live with your brother-in-law. Okay? Now think about this. How would you like to be told? How would any woman like to be told? Listen, you have to go sleep with this other guy over there. Now, he's not a stranger to you, he's brother-in-law, but I'm sure that that doesn't necessarily mean you want to sleep with your brother-in-law, right? Not only that, but aside from that, what would you think of the ethics of that perception?
In fact, during the life of your husband, you have a consciousness that you're forbidden.
Right. Okay. That's true also. But up to that, you had a perception. It's an arise. It's incestual. But over here now, you're told, hey, it's now a mitzvah to go sleep with that guy. How do you respond to that? But I don't love him, right? All the definitions we have to about sexuality and ethics. What makes a sexual act ethical and what makes it not ethical? In our world today, we tie it to marriage, and we tie that marriage to love, and we tie it to relationships, and so forth and so forth. So in a certain perception, we would say, it seems strange, very strange. It really challenges my own ethical feelings. I mean, so I can understand a woman saying, listen, I can't do that. I find that repugnant. I find it unethical for me to sleep with a man who I'm not in love with. Right?
I think for most people in that situation, they would almost feel like it's a betrayal of their husband.
Maybe.
The reverse.
Maybe.
It wasn't intended to be.
Yeah, which is the reverse of what the pasuk says. The fact is that situation.
They could easily have that feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. But the thing is that it's not just a feeling. It's actually a case of what I'm trying to define is not just a feeling, but I'm trying to find as an ethical perception. To be told that I have to have relations with this person, it doesn't meet any of my understandings of an ethical act. An ethical act given my understanding of the act of sexuality. Yet there's another perception. If you buy revelational ethics, it means that the revelations are totally defined outside of you. So if you buy revelation, your personal feelings, you're not even thinking about that. Why do I know whether something's right or wrong? Because God tells me. Right? So God tells me this is right, God tells me this is wrong. So God told me over here sex is wrong. Okay, well, I don't have any reasons. So I don't have relations in those situations because revelational ethics tells me it's wrong. Okay? This situation, God tells me it's right. Doesn't matter what I feel. It's right. Right? Fact is that in the extreme, when you think in terms of relational ethics, you can think in terms of actually challenging any aspect of any value to your own personal ethics. You sit there and say, listen, if you want to do your reason, it's up to you. You feel this reason, that reason to justify why you're buying the law. Okay? But the fact is that if you define it by revelational ethics, who's to say that revelational ethics is going to lead to a consistent structure with your personal ethics? The definition is what God tells me to do. That's it. And my emotions, I have emotions. I don't have sex with these people because God said not to. These people I have sex with. Why does God tell me to? I have no other definitions. I have no other ethical perceptions. I don't define it any other way. Ethical relations is when God tells me to. Non-ethical relations is when God doesn't tell me to. That's the only definition. And here's an example that throw away any other perceptions. This is actually an interesting question. There was an interesting question like that. There was a woman who in Germany, or I'm not sure, somewhere in Europe, there was a woman who fell for Yibum. I don't know exactly what the answer was, but there was a woman who was zikuk to Yibum. The problem was that her brother-in-law was legless, lost his legs, which meant that couldn't do chalitza. So the question is that chalitza is a separation ceremony with the shoe that causes you, that you do in lieu of yibum. Yibum is that if you die childless, you have to live with, and your husband dies childless, you have to have, you marry, or if the relations, they marry your brother-in-law. That's yibum. Chalitza is a separation ceremony that you do in lieu of marrying or sleeping with your brother-in-law. And the point being is that it's also considered to be a tremendous affront to the family. It's like the brother-in-law who is received. You reject me, yeah, Shman. So how can you don't care about your brother or whatever? It sounds very strange. And yet you see from the story, you see that the yibum in that society is extended. Not that yibum, but you see the concept of yibum, that a childless person sleeps with another member of the family, my extended family, in order to maintain the name of the previous family, was acceptable. The whole story of Ruth, right? You know, it's interesting the way people like to read the story of Ruth. It's told in the secular world. It's romantic. Ruth and Boaz, it's a beautiful story, and he sees her picking the thing, and it's really beautiful, because they want to turn it into romance, because romance and love justifies sexuality, right? According to that ethical perception. But what was the real story over there? We want to give him. She goes over to Boaz and says, "You have to sleep with me. Why? Because I'm his husband, and you're the closest relative, so let's do it." Right? And according to the Midrashim, they had one relations, and Boaz dies. He did his job. Nothing to do with their perception of personal morality within. It's right, Marcus?
No, it's a horrible idea, though. It's a wonderful idea to continue somebody's name.
Okay, it's a nice idea, but the fact is that but what does it say about sexuality? I'll sleep with someone, I really care for him, but I'll sleep with him just to maintain a name.
But in principle, it's more, there's an element that you're not discussing.
Yeah.
It's not just the name.
It's a soul. Okay, yeah.
The family line,
Right.
the soul of
Okay.
everything.
It's all the same. But you're right. So you extend
So it's a
that.
sacrifice to do it.
Ah, that's an interesting perception. The woman recognizes she's being most nefesh to do it. But you're really raising a perception over there, because what you're really trying to do is understand why this is correct pursuant to my own perspective. See, what's interesting about all this is that if you were just following the halacha as the halacha, God tells me A, do A. God tells me B, I do B. Right? I don't have any perceptions of right and wrong or something like that. Okay? That would be one thing. So I sleep with him because God told me to sleep with him. I don't need any further justification. But once you start arguing further justifications, and you're arguing Mesiras Nefesh, that she's giving up, she's obviously sacrificing in order to maintain the children, then you're already giving some kind of value to some personal perspectives on all this. See, it gets back to the Akedah issue. Okay? Avraham Avinu is told to kill Yitzchak. Okay? So what was Avraham Avinu's state when he was told to kill Yitzchak? Okay? Now, well, let me finish up with the Yibum thing. I'll give you, then I'll lead to the Avraham Yitzchak thing. In Yibum, this case came up with this man who was legless. He couldn't do chalitza. I don't know the answer. This question came to us through the age, and he was it seems that he was motivated to try and find a way, trying to say halachically, that the woman would not be bound to Yibum, right?
I'm sorry, can you just explain what chalitza is?
Chalitza,
why he couldn't do it?
Because chalitza is, you have a special shoe of the chalitza, and what happens is the woman comes and takes off the shoe and spits it at his foot and says you're rejecting this important family concept of spitting at your foot, because you're basically implied that you're not too nice a guy, right? Okay. So that being legless, the guy couldn't do chalitza. So this question came before. From what I understand, this case I didn't see it inside. Someone told me about this. That's why we're talking about the subject. And this case came before Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg, the Swedish from Switzerland, who beforehand was the last Rosh Yeshiva of Berlin. And the question emerged is that he was motivated to try and find a way this woman would not be bound to Yibum. And the question emerged, and this is how he got into the discussion, was he motivated because he empathized with this woman's potential personal moral perspective, that she is morally problematic just being told to sleep with someone without having love or emotions, and where she felt there was something immoral about a sexual act of that nature, and therefore we are going to have some type of recognition of her own personal morality, which raises much of the issue? Or was it just simply that a matter of taste, or a matter of her own sensitivity? This woman didn't want to sleep with him. Why? We're not moral. He just didn't want to sleep with him. So, sometimes we find a hefter for someone, not because more because okay, it's too hard. You don't want to do this, so we understand. It's something you don't want to do. Not that the act's immoral, but not that you feel it's immoral, but you just don't want to do it. You don't have any taste for this. Okay? So there's questions of what his motivation was and his attitude towards personal ethics or non-revelational ethics. This actually goes back to a big issue with the Akedah. See, God tells Avram to kill Yitzchak, right? Okay, so it's considered to be a big test for Avram to do this. Okay, so what was Avram's test? Okay, so the simple understanding is Avram didn't want to kill Yitzchak. Nothing to do with ethics, right? It's just that it was personally he didn't like doing it. It's like fasting Yom Kippur. I'm really hungry, but I got to fast, right? It's like it's not mitzvahs. Just only doing it. Not that it's immoral that we're doing this, but we don't like it. That's the way a lot of people look looking at Avram. He didn't want to do this act, but it's a mitzvah, so he did it. There's another issue. This comes. People talk about it in terms of Kierkegaard, but other people also dealt with it. That it was a moral dilemma. Being told to kill someone is being called upon to act immorally. Killing someone is unethical. How could God command Abraham to do something unethical? So one approach is that, what are you talking about? If God tells you to do this, by definition it's ethical. So one response to this whole question is that dilemma doesn't make any sense. What? Abraham had a feeling that it was wrong to kill someone? What's the definition of ethics? The definition of ethics is what God tells you it's right and wrong. God tells you it's right to do this, it's right to do it. It has nothing to do with an ethical issue. Right? God tells you have yibum. You're wondering, what about the ethics of sex? I don't care what you consider the ethics of sex. God tells you to do it, do it. God tells you to kill this person? What are you worried about, the ethics of murder? What is this ethical thing outside of what God tells you to do? Because the definition of ethics is what God tells you to do. So if there was a dilemma for Abraham, it was just simply in his feeling that, personally he just didn't like doing it, but it wasn't an ethical dilemma. Okay?
But in fact,
yeah?
in a case very soon after the story, Abraham argues with God about ethics.
Case before.
It's before it?
Yeah.
So that one?
Yeah.
Okay. So before it.
Right. So we'll get to that.
Where he would have a much less emotional connection.
Right. We'll get to that in a sec. Okay? Because that's a good question. Okay. Maybe we should get to that right now. But you see, Abraham does have a sense of ethics. He goes up at Sodom and he says, Nishma, can the judge of the world not do justice? There's an ethical concept of justice. Now, the fact is both stories are kind of strange. I mean, the fact is you could sit there and say, well, God knows what he's doing because God is ethical. So therefore, it must be ethical to kill Yitzchak. I just don't know why. Right? Well, I don't know why. It's always right. But he should have said that at Sodom also. He should have said, "Stop! Listen, I don't know why, but obviously it must be justice. It's God's doing it." What is Avram saying? Avram is really saying that it's not enough you know, I have to know. I don't see the justice. So he's actually giving value to his own ethical perceptions. He's saying, hey, listen, just because God tells me to do it, that's not necessarily enough for me. Okay, if that's true, then he should do that with Yitzchak. Just because you're telling me to do it, hey, that's it. But then it seems to be that there really is some kind of ethical perception. So there are people like Kant really believes that Avram should have not done it. Right? I mean, that's from a non-Jewish perspective. Should not have done it. He basically said that, hey, even if God tells you to do something unethical, you shouldn't do it because ethics is so significant. But that then says that there really is a value to my ethical perceptions. It's clear that according to some people, that's part of the issue as well. It's not just that God was telling Abram to do something that was abhorrent to him on a personal level. I don't want to kill my son, but it was also part of the issue was Abram was being told to do something that was unethical. And that was part of the dilemma. And some people answer up by the fact that Avram in the end doesn't do it. Right? So, and this obviously shows that, and God's answer is, I never intended you for to do it, therefore it was never really an ethical dilemma. But the point is that those two stories really point to something that our own personal perceptions is supposed to have some kind of value. But getting back to the Yibum case, so if our own personal perceptions is to have some kind of value, how do I work with laws that seem to have nothing to do with or seem to challenge as I develop certain ethical perceptions? And it seems to be, so then you have to try and work it out. But it really is it becomes a real problematic idea, because as we work through Judaism, Torah, people are always trying to give reasons for things, right? Right? They're always trying to give mitzvahs. They're always trying to give reasons. But every time you give a reason, you are developing another system that parallels the simple Torah system that I do because God tells me to do it. Okay? I mean, the bottom line is do you do mitzvot because God told you to do it? Right? Well, yes, but the fact is that every time we do Thu May and mitzvot, you basically are coming up with some perception that there's some reason for it. And therefore there's some system that I'm supposed to learn. And somehow how you work through that system is supposed to have something to do with this perspective. And then you run into some issues when you find movements away from our own ethical perceptions. Okay? And then we say, well, then on the other hand we have mitzvot that do develop from our ethical perceptions, like the Behaviour Sadin. You're supposed to develop some kind of ethical perception to take you beyond the law. It really becomes somewhat of a tension. I'll give you another example. And the reason I use examples from sexuality is because sexuality itself is so much in flux, right? In our world today, it's so much in flux in terms of the mores and the ethical perceptions of sexuality. So it really becomes things that what you believe is a point about sexuality is now, well, I have a whole different morality to that, and the whole different morality is very challenging. And it really puts pressure back upon the world of halacha, which is much more technical and comes up with these are do's and these are don'ts. Like Reform Judaism in Canada, you know that the Reform Rabbinate was very instrumental in the development of same-sex marriages, legalizing of same-sex marriages in Canada. Okay. If you ask a Canadian politician, his perception is that the Jewish community is in favor of same-sex marriages, and the Jewish position on same-sex marriages is that it is correct. Okay, it's a good thing to do. Okay, they don't know the difference. Orthodox Reform, the Jewish community is in favor. As a blanket statement. The Reform are very adamant about this. So I once heard a Reform rabbi speak about this, and he held Mitaira to be in favor of same-sex marriages. The guys looked at me and said, what are you guys talking about? Come on, what are you talking about? So I said, you have to understand the way they look at their definition of Torah. It obviously does not mean our definition of Torah, but they have their own definition for what is called the Judaic ethical system or the Reformed Judaic ethical system. They said it's from Torah. Ridiculous. But they have a certain way of understanding Torah, and what it's saying is that Torah is teaching us these ethics. And the ethics that you derive from Torah through the importance of the family and the importance of the monogamous relationship is the importance of sexuality and love. And what really is the ethics behind sexuality? Love. Okay? And what's the real love? The love between two souls. Right? I remember when me and a friend were going out, I'm telling this story, me and a friend we were at YU, they had these programs of blind date parties. The sophomores, guys at YU with the freshman girls at Stern. So you set them up on dates. Okay. So we were sophomores, set up. So a friend of mine who saw the girl who was making the shidduchim, I guess, right? She was making the thing. He went over there. This girl was dressed to kill. It always gets me because of her line. She was dressed to kill. And he went over to her and says, "No, what is you set me up for?" I said, "What does she look like?" So this woman looked at her and said, "Are you interested in the body or the soul? Like, what are you worried about? She looks like interested." And he just looked at her and said, "If I was interested in the soul, I'd go out with him, pointing to me." Right? In other words, I always thought of that story. And then it dawned on me that if you really follow what happened with homosexuality, it no longer became the issue of the body. It's two human souls love each other. And you're going to prevent two human souls because you're looking at the body? Who cares about the body? Man, woman, it doesn't matter. It's the soul. Two human beings should connect. Right? I mean, so you take this idea and this nice ethical perception that it's the soul that matters, and we should not be prevented to stop love because of the body. So it comes down to an interesting perspective that what it comes down to is that we develop ethical perceptions and then we run into problems. Why? Because the Torah says. And that's it. So all our reading into things, which all come from Thu May and mitzvahs and explaining, can actually yield challenges to our perceptions. We work out ways to try and explain why the Torah this and why the Torah that, and then we run across a statement in the Torah. So does that mean you shouldn't bother doing it at all? No, maybe not. But the fact is that really gives force and ammunition to the concept that revelational ethics is ethics that are separate from my own feelings of ethics. And it really comes down to this act is right, this act is wrong. That's it. And therefore, I just go by what the Torah says. I don't have to think one way or the other. But then, lo and behold, then that leads to a person. I give tzedakah because I give tzedakah. Well, compassion for the ani? No, I don't care. No, well, who says? I have to have compassion. You know, I was once at a get. And it was very upsetting to me because it was a get, and they brought a class from some yeshivas learning Gittin, so they came to see the get, and they never told the two people involved in the get that this class was coming in. All of a sudden you have a get, which was obviously a very emotional experience for the husband and wife. You have a bunch of kids looking on, like, you know. Like, I do it like this, and don't do it like this. I went over to listen. Were you informed that this school, this class was coming to watch it? No. They were upset. This was a private, personal experience. But the perception was a get. Bang, bang, bang. This is the way you break the marriage up, blah, blah, blah. Right? Hey, make sure you come see the get over here, blah, blah. And look how she takes the get. Can you do it again? And it can work because that person can work. Do you have any sensitivity situation? Oh, what sensitivity? Do you have to be concerned? No. It's the actions. Oh, but once you bring ethics into it, and you bring in that you open up this world of what we call feelings or emotions or sensitivity, then you run into a whole issue of what it is that you seem to be giving some credence to some personal perspective. And once you give credence to some personal perspective, then you have to deal with much more powerful issues. Because if that's true, what value does this personal system have? Where does it come from?
But there are actually layers of halacha that could apply. Correct me if I'm wrong. So the process of the get is a legal process.
Right.
It's a contractual
Right.
process. But we have other concepts within Judaism,
Yeah.
how people relate to each other,
Okay.
right? And causing embarrassment, causing a whole series of things,
Okay.
right? Which tell us how we're supposed to behave with the other.
So,
If you layer that onto the process, you say, okay, in order to follow through the mitzvah of this, you have to do this. But the proper way to do it involves all the other elements of, we call it derech eretz.
So you could argue, once you're
Right.
talking derech eretz, that's really a whole issue. Derech eretz is defined in many different ways. But derech eretz doesn't, that's already extra halachic. Okay, but the point is what you might want to say
You say it's
is,
outside of halacha.
what you might want to
Causing somebody
say.
embarrassment, where is
Okay,
that?
so you might want to say is the husband and wife might have been embarrassed that they're getting a divorce. So therefore, the Beit Din who invited the people to the get just said, I can't have you there because this is embarrassing to them, and now I'm going to embarrass them in public. Because, well, why should they be embarrassed? They're getting a divorce. Is that embarrassing to get a divorce?
What I'm saying is that what causes a person embarrassment is determined by the person who's embarrassed.
So you could say that's a little bit of sensitivity. So on that argument, you say, listen,
But we're required to have the sensitivity.
Okay.
Halachically we're required
Okay.
to.
Good. So good.
So what I'm saying is that if you
Right.
separate
Right.
mitzvahs one from the other,
Right.
okay, the person gets the get, they do this, they get the
Right.
mitzvah's done. But we actually don't live in a world in which mitzvahs are separated from one another. They are layered on
Right.
top of each
Right.
other.
But
There's different ways to get tzedakah, for instance.
Right. Your argument actually goes back to the Kedah principle and your issue of stone. The fact that Abraham says that Shofet Kol Eretz L'Seh Mishpat, right? There's this justice. Did he have a personal feeling of what is justice, and was asking God, "How is this just? Because I don't feel it's justice," or he was just asking a simple, question. You taught me such and such is justice, right? Technically, and since you've taught me such and such is justice, this seems to contradict that principle. Which means it's not that I have this personal, emotional aspect of that personal ethics. There's a halacha that I should not embarrass someone. This could be potentially embarrassing because the person might be embarrassed by having to get. So maybe I should have asked this question. Then what you're saying has nothing to do with any personal ethics. It's just simply the halacha is multidimensional and has many, many different rules.
I'm saying you
that
can't
to be considered.
cherry-pick the halacha.
Right. That is another argument. That's an argument that does exist. Like, for example, we talk about Lifnim Mashur Zadin. It's not because you're supposed to go with your own moral, ethical perception. It's because the fact is you're supposed to develop certain ideas from the halacha, which then you apply. But it has nothing to do with your personal feeling about it.
So you could argue that,
Yes.
not that they should have asked the couple,
They
but
had-
halachically they were required
Absolutely. Is that hurtful?
to.
Okay, which wields the question of some aspect of sensitivity, which means that the Torah does demand of you some emotional aspect, because you can't be sensitive, you can't be told exactly what's sensitive. You can't be given legislation of sensitivity. Sensitivity demands some aspect of feeling what's going on around you.
There's subjectivity to it,
Right,
for sure.
absolutely.
But I guess what I'm saying is that sometimes people view the Torah as a series of very cold dictates.
Right.
But within those cold dictates, right, is also a series of requirements in what your behavior is to the
But
other.
the issue is
The nature of it, and that's more subjective.
Right, but you're right about that. The issue is really, we always hear concepts that Ein Darshan Time of the Cry. You're not supposed to apply what you understand to be the Tameh HaMitzvot to why you do a mitzvah. You do a mitzvah because God tells you to do a mitzvah. and all the other aspects is challenged that, you know, we don't apply it, but then people always talk about this, right? Every mitzvah, there's this reason, there's that reason, and so forth and so forth, but in the end you're supposed to do it because God tells you to do it. But what people don't recognize is that issue is inherently a tremendous challenge, in the sense that if you do something because God tells you to do it, then it's outside of any personal feeling of right and wrong. Right and wrong is defined outside of you. This is okay because God says it's okay. That's not okay because God says it's not okay. That's it. I have no personal feelings whatsoever. Once you start bringing in a sense of the ethical, and you say that you have a sense of the ethical, that you're supposed to have a certain ethical feeling, certain ethical perception, then you're getting into the world to say that the mitzvot have a reason behind them, which is a world that we move towards in many, many different ways. Even if those reasons are to relate to God, to develop this, whatever the reasons are. But then you run into an issue that those reasons may challenge the black and white God says to do. Now that was one of the issues we really Hasidus. You know, it's one of the issues.
Is it a bad thing? It's not necessarily a bad thing.
But the question is that's exactly it. It can be a bad thing, because those personal feelings can lead you to say, oh, we'll do something else. I know, I daven better if I daven Shachris at 2 o'clock in the morning. That's when I have the best kavanah, right? And really what it's all about is relating to God. The law says such and such. But that doesn't work for me.
I'm having a little problem. Because as we're discussing it as now as adults, saying God says to do this, therefore we have to do it.
Right.
That's the ethics. But the truth of the matter is, being who we are, just as a baby, from childhood, you're being taught to share, to give, to have feelings, to give tzedakah because a person's poor. So that the time we get to this point, we're not walking by and saying, I don't really feel anything for you. It's ingrained in us already.
You're right.
It is part of, we do have feelings if we were brought up like any child being taught,
right.
and it's automatic.
And those feelings, the issue is those
It's
feelings.
there.
Yeah.
Naturally, because from day one the mitzvah was told to do and we were taught it.
Oh, wait a second. No. The mitzvah was told to do it and you were given a reason for doing it.
But even as a child,
as a
little one.
Even as a child you're given a reason. Isn't Shabbos beautiful?
Absolutely.
Right,
Absolutely.
Okay? The fact is, though, at some point in time, what I'm really raising here is that does the development of that system that we've all developed now as we become adults, okay? What happens when we look at that system that we've now developed and compare it to the world of the actual technical law, right? Black and white. Does it really jive, or does it not jive? The point is, it's not so simple that it jives. Okay, the fact is that this was always issues. Hasidus developed a very strong feeling this is better for kavanah and stuff like that. And the Gemara said, yeah, but there's a law. Because any time you develop an ethical perception like that, this ethical perception can lead to a situation where there's no law, and therefore there are issues where there's certain type of instruction that tries to develop the idea that it's basically the law, what's right and what's wrong. Whatever the law is, that's what you're supposed to do. Okay, which yields a perception that that really has problems with any other considerations outside the law. You know, it's like people sometimes make some jokes about from people, from people don't put on seatbelts, drive around with seatbelts. I'm gonna say it's true or whatever, because the argument is that isn't it wrong? Because what happens is there's this perception that they're so interested in the law that they don't develop any ethical perceptions beyond the law. Okay, that's one argument against them.
Why wouldn't they put it on? What's the halacha against putting on a seatbelt?
No, it's just because there's no halacha to do it, therefore...
Oh,
There is a halacha to do it.
Well, girls don't do it because it's not shniistic.
to have a seatbelt?
Yes, especially when they're on a date. Do you hear that?
I don't know that.
But isn't the law of the land, if it's not prejudicial to Jews, required
You
for
know
Jews? Except?
No, I'm going to... You're right. That's not so simple. I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example that seems kind of strange. But a person who's considered to be most theistic is Esther, right? She was really considered to be very theistic, right? But when she had to make her move on Achashverosh, it was like, can you imagine someone who's totally brought up in the world of sneas being told, okay, now you have to be a Matahari? People say, I don't even know, what are you talking about? I have no idea how to do that. Esther, obviously, okay, needs to be close, but the assumption, but it seems that it didn't work that way. So it seems to be Esther didn't develop any of the ethical perception of sneas. Sneas is this law. Oh, now you tell me I should do it? Okay, I can do it. See, what I'm trying to say is if you focus only on the action, then what's behind the action doesn't seem to be as easily assumed. What we do with actions is we're always trying to figure out a reason for action, especially in the world now with Baal Tshuva and so forth and so forth. We are really trying to say, hey, there is a development of a reason behind these actions. This develops a certain spirituality or a certain ethic or whatever it is. What we don't understand is as we develop those concepts, we are moving away from a strict definition, right, of saying, I do it because God told me to do it, which means I don't read anything into it. And that reading into it can lead to conflict. But on the other hand, okay, not reading into it also has its problems because you don't develop concepts of compassion. You don't develop concepts of other type of ethical concepts. See, the problem is a person who only does the action, he may be doing the ethical act, but he's not going to become an ethical person. Rabbi Dr. Walter Wurzburger talks about the difference between what he calls act morality and agent morality. That you can do a lot of acts, these are moral acts, but does the agent become a moral person? Does the individual doing it become a moral person? If you focus only on the acts, what about the transformation of the person? But if you transfer the person about this idea, like you said, as you become an adult, the point is you don't recognize that you are then reading into the halacha, and the halacha no longer stands on its own. And that's really the tension. That's basically what I'm going to, what I want to deal with over these next few weeks is the tension of this full development of these ideas.